This is Les Evans, founder and guitar player for Cryptic Slaughter, currently guitar player for Subversion Trigger. This is the Nothing Shocking podcast, and you are on it.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Big Strix Vinyl Records and Sports Cards, located in Rock Island, Illinois. New, vintage, and previously owned. You can find it at Big Strix. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Les Evans, formerly of Cryptic Slaughter.
And Subversion Trigger.
Yeah, his new band, Subversion Trigger. They got a 5-track EP on Bandcamp. Check it out.
Yeah, let's get to that interview.
All right, good night.
Good night. Les, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Les, thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, gents. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Man, we are so excited to have you. Let's get right into this. So before we dig into your career in Cryptic Slaughter, we think it's important to discuss your newest musical endeavor, Subversion Trigger. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about the band and the rest of the members, who's all in this band?
Sure. Subversion Trigger was basically something that I came up with completely accidentally. I didn't have anything musically going on at all, and I was at work, and I was trying to find work, getting frustrated, and I decided, the best way in the past, though I've always funneled my frustrations, the best way to do that was through music. And so I started writing music again, and I started getting really excited about what I was coming up with, because it was not exactly like the stuff I'd written before, but I was really, really getting into it. And I had written about 2, maybe 3 songs, and I decided, well, before I go any further, I'm going to reach out to my former bandmates and see if they're interested in making something new happen. Mm-hmm. And when I say former bandmates, I'm talking about people I was jamming with in the latest incarnation of Cryptic Slaughter, and being Brad Mallon, who's the vocalist, and Dave Webb, my lead guitar player. They are both members of Subversion Trigger. And they loved it, and they said, well, let's, who else do we want to get in the band? And we talked about that. On drums is Dave Abramson, who is not only a fantastic drummer, he's in a couple of bands in town, but he had worked with Brad on a number of projects in the past. There was a band called Master Musicians of Bukkake that they were both in. and they've toured Europe together, and they had a great relationship. And I knew Dave just from his other band in town, psychedelic surf band Diminishment, and they're amazing too. And I thought, well, Dave has never played thrash drums before. But he comes from that background. He was in a thrash band. He played bass in a thrash band, like back in the 80s, maybe early 90s, I guess it probably was. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, he's fantastic. And on bass is Zuleika, who is actually a guitar player. She plays guitar in a band in Seattle called Nox Novacula, who's one of the biggest bands in town. They're a death rock band, and they tour internationally. They're going to Mexico this summer. They just came back from Europe. They actually make money, which is kind of amazing in the music business. She's a guitar player, but she was willing to play bass in Subversion Trigger because she loves metal, and she hadn't been in a metal band for a while, and she really digs the music, all right. And so that's kind of how it all came together. And we started writing and playing music together so easily and so quickly, it just blew my head off. I couldn't believe how fast the band came together and all the pieces came together. So it's been a lot of fun and a hell of a creative environment to prosper in.
Fantastic.
Does the band have a hometown that it's based out of, or you guys are all over?
No, we're Seattle. Okay. That was the thing that I had decided is that I wanted the band to be all local. I wanted us to be able to get together, play, interact. All of these things are hugely important. And when you're spread out over states, it's really tough to keep in touch and to keep that thread, at least for me. I just have to be able to get together and play with people and hang out with them.
Well, we've interviewed many artists from the Seattle area. Talk to us about your thoughts on the scene right now opposed to of yesteryear, the 90s, when the Seattle grunge movement was at its highest, at its peak. Is Seattle still a hotbed for I guess, various musical genres?
I think that Seattle is an interesting mix of just about everything. There is a big metal scene here. There isn't necessarily a huge thrash scene, but we're trying to change that. There are some great local bands. Solicitor is a fantastic local speed metal thrash band. They've been around for a while. Go check their records out if you haven't, because they're just amazing. They sound like they could have been an 80s, a legendary band from the 80s, but they're not. They're from now. And another band that I've just discovered not all that long ago, who we're going to be playing with. We're playing our debut gig with a band called Disc Test. And they are local thrash, like skate, punk, thrash, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. They just bring the energy, and they're so fun. An amazing band to go see, and I'm excited to get to play with them next month.
Oh, so cool.
The new EP has 5 tracks. Can you talk a little bit about your writing approach to these new tracks? How does it work for you? Do you approach songs with the guitar in mind, or the whole song in mind, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I write music, it's funny because I never seem to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a song now. I just start playing around, and all of a sudden it happens. And I'm not exactly sure where the songs come from, or if I'm just an antenna or what. But the riffs happen. And all of a sudden, I record everything, because if I don't, I'll forget it. And I'll come back to a riff and I'll think, wow, that I really like that. What can I do to work a variation on that theme? And I'll try as many different possibilities that I can come up with. And I'm not really thinking in terms of the entire song. I try to keep it simpler than that when I'm just getting started. It's more of a mood and a vibe. And if I'm excited about what I'm writing, that motivates me to continue on and to try to piece together some other ideas. Now I have this database of riffs that I've recorded. It's kind of insane. So some of that stuff, I go, wait a minute, that riff that I wrote 3 months ago might work well with this new stuff. So I'll kind of play around with that idea too. But once I get kind of a basic arrangement together, before I even propose it to the band, I will then start editing. And these days, I try to keep everything as trim and as kind of exempt from extraneous bullshit as possible. I'm not interested in like a 5-minute intro. I want to get in and out, and I want these songs to hit people over the head and really get them excited and get them up off the couch. But I also want them to be catchy. I want these songs to stick in your head. Even before the vocal line gets laid on top of the music, I want the music alone to stick in your brain. That's just like where I've always been at. Even when I was writing riffs for Cryptic, that was what I had in mind. I was trying to write melodic stuff, even though it was very abrasive. And it's still kind of my approach now. I want it to be aggressive. I want it to be like really, really in your face. But I also want it to stick in your head, and I want you to be singing the song an hour after you turn it off.
So cool. Right now you have the band's EP on pre-sale on Bandcamp. The EP will be released on compact disc and cassette tape format.
Woo!
Yes, so cool. That's fantastic. But I guess the thing that probably you've been asked millions of times, no vinyl. Talk about releasing them on CD and cassette, but yet not doing it on vinyl.
Well, that's still a possibility. The thing is that we put out this demo, essentially, on Bandcamp, just so we can get our name out there and people start listening and start playing gigs. We didn't really expect this to be released. It was a local label called Nameless Grave who approached us and said, hey, we'd like to put this out on cassette and CD. And we were like, great. So I don't think they deal much in vinyl, on that label, and not that I've seen anyway. So it could be, we could get a release on a different label at some time in the future on vinyl. That would be fantastic too. But, at this point, what we really want to do is get signed, and Nameless Grave is fantastic, and we might end up doing a record with them, but we might also find a label that's a little bit bigger than that. And it would be nice to, to get a little bigger reach, a little wider, kind of distribution, that kind of thing. But, everything's up in the air at this point, and we're just kind of testing the waters to see who's interested and see where it might lead.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Well, I guess talk a little bit more about your approach to promotion. I mean, nowadays it is more back DIY, doing it yourself, like the early days. Can you talk a little bit about getting your name out there?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that, and at the same time, there's something about having a label release your music that makes it more legitimate, at least in my eyes. And when you've got certain labels have better distribution than others, obviously. It's really about getting the music out there, getting it heard. That's the toughest thing now.
Yeah.
I mean, DIY is, everybody is on the self-promotion thing now. You have to be. But it's so tough. There's so many bands, and there's only so many hours in the day. Right. And so you're like, hey, I got this new band, and people are like, oh, I can listen to another new band, please. I can't handle any more new bands. So, I mean, I get that too, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you get somebody to listen, you get the right person to listen, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is good.
Absolutely.
I'm really proud of this music. I'm really, really happy. And we recorded this whole thing that, that's out now, the 5 songs. We did that all in our lead guitar player's basement. he produced it, he mixed it. He did a great job with that. We found another guy who is really exceptional at mastering thrash, and so we're really stoked on how it came out, the way it sounds and everything. But we would love to re-record those songs and add 5 or 7 more and put out a full-length record. That's kind of the goal.
Oh, very good. Well, New Fear Rising is my favorite track on the EP. It gives me like almost like anthem vibes for the band. But can you talk a little bit more about that song, the whole creation of it?
That was the very first song I wrote for Subversion Trigger. When I was sitting, like I said, sitting here frustrated about not being able to find a job, that was the song that I came up with. And I was like, God, this is kind of different for me. This is not like the typical kind of thing that I would be known for. Exactly. And I guess that's why I dug it. And I think it's rhythmically interesting in as much as there's some kind of interesting rhythms going on in between the spaces in that song that make it fun, I think, for me to listen to and play. And particularly the bridge, what that evolved into was so much beyond what I ever imagined. Specifically, what Dave Webb, my lead guitar player, and Brad, my vocalist, are doing on top of the very heavy riffing and incredible drumming that's going on in that bridge. And those guys, they got together and there's this, like, Brad is kind of mimicking what the guitar, the lead line is doing. And it's so cool. And I sit there and I listen to that and I go, I could have never have dreamed this up in a million years. And that's why collaborative songwriting really matters, because this band in particular, we really are more than the sum of our parts when you look at it that way. Because, and just to get back to Jeff's question about the songwriting process, when I present a song to the band, I don't tell Dave Abramson, okay, this is how I want you to play the drums. He plays the drums, and I'm like, God, that's great. That's perfect, And and I don't tell Brad how to write lyrics or sing. And when I started this new band, and Dave Webb, wanted to continue playing as my lead guitar player, I told him, I go, look, man, this is what I want you to do. I want you to sit down, set aside an hour, sit down and listen to Kill 'Em All with the headphones on, straight through with no distractions. And it's not because I want to be a clone of early Metallica, but what I love about that record is, first of all, the energy just jumps off the vinyl. Mm. It's insane how much energy is in that record. But also, a lead can break out at any time. It doesn't have to be like the bridge or whatever. Right. They're just throwing out leads at you all over the place, and they're so loud and in your face, and I love that. I go, that's what I want. I want you to be the guy that can just go off and do whatever you want whenever you feel like it, and I'll hold the rhythm down. That's basically what I said. So Dave is coming up with some incredible melody lines and lead lines, and it doesn't always work, but I encourage, let's try everything. It doesn't hurt to try, because if we don't like it, we don't have to use it. But sometimes when you use that kind of open method to let's try everything, you really hit on stuff that you never, ever would have thought of in the first place.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the gear that you used on the album. We talked to some artists, and they've got that signing with a certain guitar, and there's others that it doesn't matter what it is. I'll pick it up and it's great. How does it work for you?
In the past, I never paid hardly any. I didn't pay that much attention to, my sound. You get the specific sound in mind. That didn't really. It wasn't a priority of mine. But now it's a little different. And what I'm using on this album is I play an Ibanez. Really, it's an Ibanez Prestige 2004 model. That's not not like a high end Ibanez. It is Japanese made. But I fell in love with those guitars, and I don't think I want to play anything else ever again. I mean, and this is after playing a Fender Strat for my entire career with Cryptic. I had played the same guitar, recorded every album with that same Fender Stratocaster, and I still own it. But when I pick it up and play it now, it's not what I want to be. What I want to do anymore. So I'm totally into the Ibanez in terms of the guitar. I play through a Boogie cabinet, and I use a pedal as a preamp. There's a company called Rev that makes heads. They're out of Canada, REVV, but they make pedals too, and the pedals you can use as a preamp, and it's just incredible. The first time I set it up that way and I played through it, I couldn't believe how good it sounded. We then played two gigs with that setup, and I was like, oh, and I do have a head, of course. I use the Blug, which is a little mini thing. I don't know if you know who Thomas Blug is, but he invented this little tiny 1,000-watt head that is a tube amp. It's got a micro tube in it, but it's 1,000 watts. You can take it on the plane, put it right in your bag, and it's easy to truck around. And for if you're traveling to festivals and stuff, you can either do what I'm doing, or you can hope that the head that they have for you is actually going to work. I had a couple of bad experiences. I don't like Marshalls, and I know that's blasphemy, and people are probably like shutting off the podcast. I don't want to listen to this guy anymore. But I do not like Marshall, and I get stuck with Marshalls at all these festivals, and I'm like, fuck this. I'm not playing these tinny-sounding fucking amps anymore. And so, I went to lengths to find a tiny little head that I could truck around with me, and with the Rev preamp distortion, it's just exactly what I'm looking for. A mean, dirty sound that's not overly distorted. I'm not trying to sound like, black metal or whatever. I just want it to be, in your face, and I want to be heard.
Fair enough. Yeah. You touched upon about recording the EP in a basement, and we've spoke to many of artists that have adapted to this new way of recording music in their home, wherever it is, getting away from going into a proper studio. Talked about this new technology of recording in your home now, opposed to getting into a proper studio, knocking things out the old-fashioned way.
The studio experience is intimidating. Yeah. Because even when you are comfortable and you're rehearsed well, it's so expensive, right? As soon as you're on the clock, and that pressure, you start feeling that pressure immediately. And it's really strange because you don't know it until you experience it. And so the nice thing about recording at home is if you fuck up, you just do it again. And you're not paying anybody for the time. So there's a huge advantage to that. It's so much less stressful. And just immediately you're more relaxed, because in your head, well, if this doesn't sound great, I can just do it again, and it's not going to cost us $200 or God, that's old. Those are the old, costs for studios. They're probably more like $500 an hour now for the top ones.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I would still love to record a record in a real studio again, but there is a nice advantage. It's really about the mics. I think if you're willing to invest in decent mics to set things up and get a little creative with it, you can get great sounds out of your home studio or basement, as the case may be.
Fair enough. Yeah, for sure.
Talk a little bit more about you're part of that crossover thrash, culture, and the big bands that came out of that era. Can you looking back and in the scene now, can you talk about interacting with fans and how humbling that must be, like, when they come up and either remember you or talk about, hearing you the first time?
Oh yeah, that always blows me away. Even in particular, because when I was making this music in the 80s, when we came up with this sound, I didn't expect it to last. And I was a fan of classic rock. I grew up on Aerosmith and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and Kiss, and those, and I knew those bands, people would be listening to them in 100 years. But I didn't think anybody would be listening to Cryptic Slaughter beyond the 80s. It was kind of like, we're making music for a specific time and specific place and a specific audience, and it'll all be forgotten. And that's kind of a kind of a fatalistic way of looking at it, but that's really how I thought it would go down. And now that, and you can thank the internet for keeping our name alive.
Sure.
And we, the records were reissued on Relapse back in 2002. And here's the funny story. So Matt Jacobson, the founder of Relapse, and Sean Pelletier were basically running Relapse back in 2001, and they had been trying to track me down for 5 years because they had gotten in touch with Metal Blade and said, hey, we want to reissue the first 2 Cryptic Slaughter records. And Metal Blade goes, oh, no, we're going to do that. And Relapse said, okay. And then Metal Blade realized that they had let the option on our contract expire. They didn't have the rights to do that anymore. And Relapse found that out, and then they started trying to track me down, but they couldn't find me. And those guys tried to find me for like 5 years before they finally got a hold of me. And I took a phone call in 2001, and it was Sean Pelletier, who everybody calls Pellet. He's quite famous in the underground scene. He manages the band Pentagram, by the way.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And Pellet called me up and goes, oh, my God, we've been trying to find you for so long. I work for a label called Relapse. We really want to reissue Money Talks and Convicted. And I said, my honest response was, why? Why the hell would you want to do that? Nobody's going to give a shit. And he goes, you don't understand. You guys are legends. And I was like, are you kidding me? I didn't believe it at all, And I've already had a healthy distrust of record labels by that point, and I hadn't been involved. I really hadn't been doing music at all for like 10 years by that stage. And I had a 3-year-old, son at home. I was working full time. I was just like, are you guys for real? And, I did a little research and found out that Relapse was a legit label and one of the biggest underground labels at the time, and still is. And I was like, and I still didn't, I still had my doubts, but I thought, if nothing else, if I get a copy of these records that I can give to my son when he gets older, this will be worth it. So I said, yeah, go ahead, reissue the albums. And then shit started to snowball, the other weird thing was I was looking at eBay, and this is in the early days of eBay, and I was watching people bid on Cryptic CDs, and it was like the first one I saw went up to $100. I was like, wow, that's weird. And then the next auction was like $175, $200. I'm like, what the hell's going on? This one dude paid $375 for a Money Talk CD. I said, what in the fuck is happening? Who the hell is paying money for this?
I might have been one of those people bidding on the. I might have been. I'm not gonna lie.
So yeah, man. No, it really still blows me away. And one of the coolest things to me that I experienced in the recent when we were gigging again was like we went to Portland and these 2 little kids came to the show. They both had Cryptic shirts on, and I mean like 8-10 years old little. And as soon as they walked in the door, they went over to the merch table and they bought more shirts. And one of those kids came up on stage and was singing, and I'm like, my God, this music really does have staying power. It's appealing to generations I never thought would be able to hear it or even understand it at all. So yeah, it's pretty special.
Well, the really cool thing about Cryptic Slaughter is, it's a true story of inspiration for any young musician of any genre coming up, because you guys were just kids when you got signed. Can you talk a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah, that was weird. First of all, when I was trying to start Cryptic, I couldn't even find any musicians my age that wanted to do that kind of music. It was just so underground. And I knew guys who played guitar, but they were all more into like kind of standard metal, Judas Priest kind of stuff.
Right.
And I had been into that when I was when I was younger, but I saw this new wave is really exciting, and it's really all I wanted to do was play fast music. And so I used to teach guitar to a kid who actually I used to babysit. And the reason I used to babysit him is because my parents knew his parents, because they were all involved in the local soccer leagues. Like my parents basically ran AYSO in Santa Monica, the American Youth Soccer Organization, Region 20. They basically were very, very much in the thick of things in running that. And then my dad was president of a different soccer league. I played in both. And so like my life for a long time was endless soccer. We'd like practices every night, 3 games on the weekend. It was just nuts. But this kid I babysat was also a soccer player, good player, but he was like 3 years younger than I was. And I started teaching him how to play guitar, and I was like, hey, you should be in this band that I'm trying to start. And he knew a kid who played drums, or who was trying to learn how to play drums, named Scott Peterson, who was also his age. And so I was 17, and those two were 14 when we first started playing in the summer of 1984. And it was a long road to getting those guys kind of up to speed musically. But and then Adam, the other guitar player, eventually dropped out. His parents didn't want him involved in music because it was distracting from his studies, and that was absolutely happening. So I, and we also met Bill through the same guy, through Adam as well. Bill was actually also a soccer player on Adam's team. So Scott, Bill, and I, the original core membership of Cryptic Slaughter, we were all soccer players in Santa Monica. And that's how we met. That's how we all came together. But the early days was just trying to figure out, what are we going to sound like? We like all bands, we played covers, and we started to write original material, and we eventually released a demo about 2 months before I graduated, and actually more like 6 weeks before I graduated high school. And back then, the demo could only get, it was basically so your friends could hear it. But there was this new phenomenon happening where people were trading tapes, demo tapes, rehearsal tapes, live tapes. And you would have these guys that would send you a list, and this would be all the live shows they had, like Slayer at Radio City in Anaheim, and Exodus at Ruthie's in Berkeley. And you'd look at that list and you go, oh, I want that show. And then you try to find a show from some band that they didn't have, and you would trade. You would mail each other tapes. And so it became this huge thing, this huge underground thing, and it was totally organic. This was music that at the time very few labels had any interest in at all. And a lot of these bands, just fell by the wayside. But I started meeting people in this scene that I still know now, like Genocide out of Michigan. Well, they later became Repulsion. But at first, they were just kids like me trying to play fast and figure out how we're going to do this. Who's is there anybody else? We'd find somebody, oh, wow, you like this music too. Even though you're in Michigan, like you're my best friends now. It was like this us against the world vibe. And, I should bring this up too. One of those early people to contact me, even before we got signed to Metal Blade, was a guy named Mark Sawickas, who unfortunately just passed away 3 days ago. Yeah, he was the founder of a band called Impetigo, and they kind of were a gore grind band that I guess their first record came out in 1990, which was a little later than most of this stuff. But Mark was doing a fanzine called Uniforce back in 1986, I guess is when it started. And he was a real amazing ambassador because he loved both punk and metal, and he had both punk and metal bands in his fanzine. And he was really inclusive about inviting everybody. Didn't matter. He was even into Mr. Bungle in the early days when what the hell are these guys about? And Mark was like, no, they're super cool. You got to check them out. And so he was, that was how crossover started. And it was really, people don't understand this, but there was a time when punk and metal kids would fight each other just because they like different kinds of music. In high school, there'd be fights. And it's like, oh yeah, I got to fight with this punk asshole, and it was only because we wore our hair differently. I never got involved in those kind of shenanigans, but this is how one of the ways that crossover really started for me. Well, first of all, I grew up in Santa Monica, which is where Suicidal Tendencies was from, and their debut record is a crossover masterpiece. That's still top 10 all-time thrash record for me. And to hear the guitar playing on that album as compared to what most punk bands sounded like back then, it was a revelation. It's like, my God, this is incredible. And so I went to school with kids who, we went to junior high together, and by high school they were punk, and they knew that, that I was into hardcore metal. And so I'd be wearing, Slayer shirts to school, and they would say, hey, can I borrow that Slayer album? I'll bring Bad Brains and GBH. And we started to trade records back and forth. And, I'd record all their punk records. They'd record all my metal albums. And that was really how crossover became a thing. Yeah. You started to share music. You started to realize we have more in common than we thought. And for me personally, when we were writing music, I was like, wait a minute, we can stick to this horror fantasy lyric stuff, or we could start writing lyrics that really matter, that really mean something. Let's do that. To me, that's a lot more relevant than just, writing about, whatever kind of horror music. And I'm not trying to denigrate what anybody is into. I totally get it. But for me, hearing a band like RKL and what they were singing about, that was like, wow, these guys mean what they say. The sincerity really grabbed me, and I was totally sold.
Fantastic.
Let's talk about the reissues a little deeper. They were reissued with bonus tracks. Did Cryptic Slaughter vault? Did you guys have to sift through a bunch of tracks to find them, or have you guys pretty much released everything as it came out?
I think that most of those bonus tracks came from live videos that fans shot. Like, I know on the Convicted reissue, there are some live songs from a show that we played in Houston at the Axiom little club in Houston, and at Blondie's in Detroit too. So we basically, we took the music right from the videotape and stuck it on there. I have a number of live shows on video of Cryptic shows that I bounced down to DVD back when DVD burners were a new thing. But not all of that stuff sounds great because, the technology of the time and the you're playing at a club where the sound man may or may not have any idea how to mix a thrash band. Never know, right? And so, it was always kind of interesting. We played a couple of shows in Los Angeles that didn't even have a PA. I mean, I guess it did have a PA for the vocals, but like the bass and the drums and guitar weren't mic'd. It was just play loud and and everybody will have a good time. So we do still have there's a couple of things still that might be interesting to release, but I don't think we're probably not gonna release anything else. You mentioned that with the reissues that that Relapse did, Money Talks and Convicted.
Right.
Dream was reissued, but it was about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, on a label out of Italy called FOAD.
Oh, wow.
They did a fantastic reissue of Stream where they cleaned up the sound as much as they could. Bless them. But they also, it's a 2-album deal, and it is vinyl, by the way. They put it out on vinyl and CD. But that second record is rehearsal from the same songs. And the rehearsal songs might even sound better than the record. And there's a track on there that didn't make it onto the record. So that's kind of interesting too. Cool. It's just called Song X because we didn't actually record it when we went into the studio, but it is on that reissue.
So where is Speak Your Piece at in all this? It was like the redheaded stepchild that got left out of the reissues.
Still is. Yeah. Speak was reissued by a Greek label a few years ago. So that one did finally get its reissue as well on vinyl and CD. That kind of interesting. I wasn't really involved much in that process. It was just the label did it, and I was like, cool. But yeah, no, that album was, after we broke up, the original band broke up on the basically on the road. On our first tour, we were all going in mentally we were going in different directions at that point. We didn't know how to communicate, which is kind of a cliche thing to say, but it's true. Nobody back then gave you a book, especially when you're kids, when you're young. Nobody gave you a book that said, this is how to deal with your bandmates and this is how you should, communicate with them. And it was just, 4 years and we felt like we'd had enough. And the other thing was I thought that thrash was going away. At that point, I was kind of like, what else can be done with this music, really? Right. The bands that were really getting my attention at that point were Jane's Addiction and Faith No More and Soundgarden and Voivod. And Voivod had started as thrash, but they had certainly evolved into something much more sci-fi weird. And really, Voivod was one of my big influences for Speak Your Piece. Brian Lafelt, who played drums on that record, who was Wehrmacht's drummer for their entire history, we were taking a lot of acid and listening to a lot of Voivod, and that album basically evolved was through experimentation. And I really wanted to do something different. People were upset that it didn't sound like the original band, and I'm like, yeah, it's me and 3 new guys. You really want us to sound like a clone of the original band? It's like that's not why I reformed the group. But I get it. I understand why people were like, well, this doesn't sound like Cryptic Slaughter, and they're right, it doesn't. But in my defense, I will say I think every single Cryptic Slaughter record sounds different. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think that Convicted, Money Talks, they all, even though it was the same lineup recorded the first 3 albums, I do think there's a distinct difference in every record we made.
I'm going to be a little selfish here when I say this, but I feel like Stream of Consciousness was the band Sgt. Pepper. That's just me. I'm being biased here. That's my thought.
I appreciate that, and one of the best compliments that album ever got was from Dan Lilliker of Nuclear Assault and Brutal Truth. He said, and I read this. I didn't talk to him, but I read it. He goes, man, I wish that record sounded better because I think it's the best stuff they ever did. But it's so hard to listen to, and I agree with him. It's really fucking hard to listen to.
I disagree. I think it sounds great.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm the same guy that thinks that Join the Army by Suicidal Tendencies is their best album, and it does sound like a tin can in many ways. So.
So funny that you mentioned that. I was listening to that record in my car the other day and thinking the same thing. I was thinking that because I knew Rocky before he joined Suicidal.
Yes.
In fact, he and I were jamming together. We were trying to put together a band, just like a straight metal band with these two other people that we knew just from the local scene in L.A. And I knew how good he was. And I used to see him at shows all the time. And Rocky was always wasted, always drunk. And he was like a dude who could be drunk but not pass out. He was like on his feet. His head would be hanging down. That's how you knew he was drunk. But we were in the pit at Slayer was playing the country club, which was they had graduated. Slayer used to play little clubs. They had graduated to a 1,000 person size hall, and Dark Angel was opening up for him. Which I saw Dark Angel and Slayer play so many times I can't even count. But it was in between. Dark Angel had finished, and Rocky rolled up, and he had a Suicidal Tendencies pin on. And I said, "Where'd you get that?" And he goes, "Oh, I went to the rehearsal today. I just tried out for the band." And I go, "You tried out for Suicidal today?" And his head is hanging down, right? He's wasted. So I'm trying to have a conversation with a guy who's totally drunk. And he's like, "Yeah." I go, "Well, how'd it go?" He's like, "I'm in the band." I go, "You're in Suicidal Tendencies?" And he's like, "Yeah." I couldn't believe it. And of course, the first record he recorded with him was Join the Army. And I like the album. I like the material. And a couple of those songs, like Human Guinea Pig and War Inside My Head, those were OG Suicidal tunes from their first demos, like going early days. But yeah, the production, I don't like. I don't like the next record either. But Lights Camera, that album in terms of production and everything coming together, for me, that is what made Rocky a legit guitar god. On that album, he just shines so hard, it blows me away to this day.
It's a great album. Yeah. But you don't like How Will I Laugh, huh? I can't believe that.
It has some good songs on it, but it's the riffing is just a little generic for my taste.
Fair enough.
Just a little. DRI kind of went in that direction for me too. It's just kind of like, I've heard this kind of stuff before. I want more originality. And I think in Suicidal's case, I think they really came through on the record after How Will I Laugh.
Absolutely. So got one more question for you, then we'll leave you alone for the evening. So this is kind of like a two-parts question here. So I wanted to talk about the Cryptic Slaughter balance between taking hard rock punk and metal, and you became the crossover band that you were, but you were able to keep that balance of sound. And with that, on the flip side, you guys are very revolutionary for your time for the speed that you guys played at, and you were just kids. Can you talk about the balance, and then that was it that mission to play faster than anybody else at that time?
No, that's the amazing thing. Like Siege from Boston. Have you heard of those guys? They were an early band, super fast. And I remember reading interviews with them where they were like, "We want to be the fastest band in the world. That is our goal." We never set out to do that, which is the funny thing. And in fact, it evolved so organically. And it was really just because Scott was getting better and better as a drummer. And as he got better, he was playing faster. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, keep that up. Keep playing that tempo." And I started to shape my riffs to match the speed that he was playing. And we still didn't really understand until we were ready to record, and we went into the studio, and I was like, we really have something that doesn't sound like anybody else here. And it was, again, I don't want to claim like, "Oh, yes, I planned this all out. It was all orchestrated, my vision." It just kind of fucking happened, We tried playing certain things certain ways, and and we came to this kind of understanding of, we're going to play really fast. No one else, at least the bands we were listening to weren't playing weren't playing that fast, but it was like an adrenaline rush for us. We really got off on the speed, and so that's why it became so prevalent on Convicted in particular, because it was like, this is fun. Let's keep this up. Let's see where this goes, and how far can we take this. And when we were recording that album with Bill Metoyer, legend Bill Metoyer, producer of Slayer, DRI, BOC, so many great bands, and when he played some of those early, the tapes to Brian Slagle, the president of Metal Blade, Brian asked him, "Did you speed this tape up?" And Bill laughed at him, and he's like, "No, that's just what they sound like." He thought it was hilarious. But it was really just, and the other thing was, of course, we were angry young men at that point, at least when it came to the music. We didn't walk around pissed off. Well, I guess Bill kind of did. He was kind of pissed off all the time. But most of us, the rest of us, were pretty happy-go-lucky. But any anger that we had, we funneled into the music. That was our release. You get 4 guys not getting laid, 16, 17, 18 years old. It's like, this is a dangerous combination. But we had music as a way to get out those frustrations about the political landscape, about, what was going on at school, whatever was happening in our lives, we could take out that frustration in our music. And that was a great release for us. And so, yeah, the way that the songs were crafted was just, one of my things was, I don't want to sound like anybody else. I don't want to have somebody put on our record and go, oh yeah, this sounds like, those guys, or this sounds like that. And I wanted to sound like Cryptic Slaughter. And I think we achieved that. And people loved us or hated us. And I was okay with that. I'm okay with creating that kind of reaction, because the people who loved us really loved us, like insanely so. And they still do. The ones that are still around anyway.
Oh, so cool. Well, Les, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
Oh, man. Just keep an eye out for Subversion Trigger releases and gigs. We're trying to bring fun back to thrash. I'm trying to bring excitement back to thrash. Want to get you off your couch and have a good time. That's my main focus. The other thing is, we all know what's going on right now in this country. Resist. Do not give in to this bullshit. Do not normalize fascism. Do not normalize hatred. Love is the answer, and it will be the only thing that takes us through this shit. And all regimes change, and these motherfuckers, they are going to pay. We're going to have our own Nuremberg trials over these fucking assholes, and they're all going to go down. That's the way I see it, and that's either happening or I'm moving the fuck out of this country. One or the other.
Fair enough. Well, this is how things are going to work out. Jeff, the editing wizard, will clean up all of our boogers tonight, and we'll make it sound like $1 million. Sound good?
No editing. No censorship. No, man, it was great. I really appreciate the discussion. I have a great time talking about the current band, and I have a great time talking about the old days. And thank you guys so much for having me on. Yeah, I look forward to checking it out.
And then we'll share it to all of our socials. Please share it to yours, okay, man?
Yeah, stoked. Can't wait.
Take care of yourself. Have a good one.
All right, good night.
Good night.
You too, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
nest of snakes. Everybody grinds the stone and makes their own mistakes. Hide in the headlights, fight the grip of fear. You can make your dreams come true, but you just can't do it